So why do we have this course? What is the motivation for it? Now, when we think about creativity, we think about something new. And so the umbrella that all creativity exists under is innovation. Now, the question is, where does the innovation come from? Is it based on something that already exists or something that's totally brand new we haven't seen before? For example, you've all seen barcodes. A lot of you have probably seen IV drug bags in hospitals. Well, somebody put a barcode on that bag. Now, that's not inventive because both technologies already existed, but it is innovative. So when we think about innovation, it could be one of two ways, something that comes out of something that already exists or something that's new and original for us. And that's what we refer to as invention. Subsequently, how do people take advantage and create this stuff? It could either be done internally in a company, which is called entrepreneurship, or somebody goes off and starts their own venture, which is entrepreneurship, which you're very familiar with. So what entrepreneurial mindset is about is when you look at something and then all of a sudden you see an opportunity there and you decided to take advantage of it. So how do you develop this kind of mindset? Does everybody have it? And the answer is no, because you need a certain kind of attitude to go ahead and do something like this. And the thing is, can formal innovation teach you to be an innovator? Well, yes and no. And you have to think about the nature of things. And that's my key word for when you look at something, there's a way that it acts and the way it exists, and that's its nature. And the nature of things is to be lazy. Tell me, does water flow uphill or does it flow downhill? Well, naturally, because of gravity, it flows downhill because it's easier. And then when you look at the state of atoms and everything else, everything exists in its lowest energy state. Things inherently want to work at the least amount of energy you can put on it. Now, the thing is, when we make decisions because we believe they're in our best interest. But how we look at that return is about perception. How do we shape it to think there is perception? Now, the way things work is in order to get something to happen, you need a certain amount of energy to make it happen. And this is why so many corporations fail in their initiatives. And that's because they don't understand that in order to make this happen, you have to change a lot of things. You have to change your company rules, and you have to have reward systems and everything else. And that's why if you don't make it up that barrier, what happens? Everything goes back to where it started from. And so if you have to invest a lot of energy for something to happen, odds are you're not going to try it. It's just too much work and not enough return for you. However, if you're educated and all of a sudden you see that it's not as much energy, then you're more likely to try it. And that's what this course is about, to teach you this, to basically look at problems and think, hey, I can solve that, and that's not too bad. And all of a sudden, all these barriers start to come down because the activation is a lot less. Now, entrepreneurship is based on something they call the 7 C's. And so here are the 7 C's. And they said if you have these 7 C's, you'll have an entrepreneurial mindset. Well, here's kind of the problem with all this. And that's that some of these are personality traits. And personality traits are just really hard to teach. Like you all know people who are lazy or people who are just unmotivated or whatever, and it's like, how on earth are you going to, teach them to do certain things? Now, a lot of people say, well, you can bribe them, profit. But profit is a difficult motivator to maintain. Short run it works, long term it doesn't, because people just say, oh, screw the money, forget it, I don't care. And some people are inclined to be innovators and some people aren't. So how do you get these 7 C's to actually work for you? Well, the hard truth is that some of these, there's not a lot you can do through education. Curiosity, your commitment to something, your continuous learning, those are attitudes and those are difficult to teach someone. And so the thing is, we're all curious. We're all human beings, but we all have certain degrees of curiosity. Some people are more curious than others. My grandsons, it's really funny. My daughter had this fireplace in the middle of her living room, and she caught one of my grandsons trying to crawl up it because he was curious of what was going on inside there. Creativity. You're saying, well, how do you be more creative? And so we will have a lecture on creativity to show you that people make creativity a lot more difficult than what it needs to be. That creativity fundamentally is just about how you make connections with things. Confidence. You gain confidence if you believe you're going to be successful. And so we'll be talking about the different things that you can do. So you'll look at something and think, yeah, I can do that. Commitment, this comes from your internal drive. Courage. Well, here's the thing about courage, and that's that people's attitudes towards it. But if you bring down risk, then all of a sudden people start becoming a lot more courageous. That is something you can have an effect on. An example is, I tend not to take danger that seriously. And one time I was on an airplane, and we were in a big storm, and we were watching like lightning around the plane, and we were like bouncing all over the place. And it got so bad, the beverage cart literally flipped over, and people started panicking, and everybody was yelling. I had a window seat, and I'm looking out the window, and I'm thinking, so this is how I buy the farm. I always thought I'd be two in the back of the head. But anyway, then the pilot rose above the storm, and everything was fine. And this woman sitting next to me said, "You were so brave. How could you be so calm through that entire thing?" And I just said, screaming doesn't make the plane go down any slower. Again, not courage, just a matter of attitude. Collaboration. Do you understand others? How do you use emotional intelligence? And continuous learning. Hopefully a lot of you will have it, but what it comes down to is what's your personal drive and what's your return on investment. I'm constantly learning. I'm constantly trying to find new things. One thing I'm an old man, and my fear is that I'm going to get soft. However, there are different kinds of jobs for different kinds of people. Meaning if you're more of a disciplined person, then you probably should go into more like QA or manufacturing. If you're a creative person, then you want to go into research. You want to engineer things, and that was pretty much me. On the other hand, drive and creativity are not exclusive to one end or the other. You can always apply it to something. The thing is, entrepreneurship has been the great gold rush, and now it's coming to an end. And there are thousands of programs in the United States. On the other hand, the success rate in entrepreneurship hasn't gone up, despite all these programs. And so you could pretty much say they haven't been successful. Focus on Teaching is they talk a lot about entrepreneurial mindset. And they also talk a lot about design thinking. And all design thinking is you use a scientific method. You have a hypothesis, you go out and do tests, you measure it, and then you figure out, what should I go do next? What people should talk more about is systems thinking. And that's that when you actually look at something and need to get it to work, you need to understand how all the pieces interact and how they all come together. And so the bias, though, has been towards EM and DT instead of systems thinking. What it comes down to is there's a pendulum between creativity and order. And what happens is you have too much creativity, things just go crazy because there's no order to it, there's no discipline. So therefore you have to go more towards, the pendulum swings towards order because now you have to put rules and processes in place. But then you got too many rules and processes, and so the pendulum swings back in the other direction. And it's constant. It's constantly going back and forth between the two. So how do you find that balance? How did all this thinking start? Well, first it started with the scientific method. And they use that to deal with uncertainty. And it's about validating something, seeing if it works. And verification means, can it work more than once? Tim Brown of IDEO came up with, hey, let's take this approach and apply it to creating new ventures or towards business or whatever. And so he used that scientific process to do that. And then Eric Ries came along, and he basically took IDEO's idea and came up with the Lean Startup. Now, the Lean Startup is well written. It's a simple narrative. And so everybody has fallen in love with the Lean Startup, which came out in 2012. Here's the problem with the Lean Startup. And when I saw the Lean Startup in the beginning, I was railing against it. Because it doesn't work. A lot of it doesn't work. There has not been one successful product that followed the Lean Startup that's been successful. And not only that, but you look at biases. Eric Ries is a software guy. Like, for example, Ries tells you, keep trying experiments, keep trying experiments. And the problem is software, you can do that. Because what does software cost you? Well, you're just pushing electrons around. So the cost is basically just in human capital. On the other hand, when you talk about physical products, you don't get an infinite number of tries. It's expensive. You're talking about materials. Not only that, you're talking about time. And there are some things in time you cannot get around. And I had a boss who said, well, you're not doing a good enough job engineering. And I just looked at him and I said, 9 women can't have a baby in 1 month. That's not the way it works. If something takes 10 hours to bake, you have to take 10 hours. And this is where the Lean Startup fails. The problem is that all entrepreneurship, all these 3,000 programs, they're all predicated on the Lean Startup. And I've even said it to our TM faculty, we need to go do something different because this thing is a failure. And yet nobody wants to talk about that. There's no proof whatsoever that it works. The only person who's been railing about it is me and Luis Breva at MIT, so I guess it's an MIT thing. You need to understand the nature of what something is. And the nature of entrepreneurship is a journey through uncertainty. And now the big advantage of this mission through uncertainty is you know how you want the story to end. But the process is supposed to glean information from the journey, not define what the journey is. And so you're venturing into the unknown. The thing is, how well do people handle uncertainty? Well, the nature of experimentation is to travel into the unknown. And a lot of people call it a lot of different things, but it's all about uncertainty, whether it's validation or research or whatever. Here's the problem with dealing with uncertainty. Entrepreneurs, 1 in 10 is really successful. Pharma, less than 9.6%. PhDs take 4 to 7 years to do their doctoral research. The thing is, your chances of beating late-stage cancer are about the same as this. That's how bad your odds are, and nobody talks about that. That's how hard it is. Now, why did these guys beat the odds? What made them so smart? And what it comes down to is these guys were not brilliant, but they had vision, meaning the moment they saw their idea, they saw the path they needed to go into from beginning to end. And the thing is, traditional thinking is you start thinking spot to spot. Systems thinking, you look at complexities. You're either looking at something top down or bottoms up. And bottoms up is you look at all the pieces and see what picture it's painting for you. And the thing is, a lot of systems thinking tends to go by certain rules. And what you want to do in times are change those rules. And so there are limitations to this because systems don't want to change. Now, it's really funny. Some of you will take a course with Professor Griffin, wonderful teacher. And it's really funny because she and I tend to be total opposites. And yet we really appreciate each other and we really like each other. And Professor Griffin had the best way of putting it. She said we're yin and yang. And what yin is destruction and darkness. And yang is the light and the creation. And so I say I'm the yin and she's the yang. And a student asked me, well, why do you call yourself a yin? It's so, you know, pessimistic and dark. But here's the thing. If systems don't want to change, then if you want to create something new, you're going to have to destroy it. And that's the thing about yin and yang. The philosophy of yin and yang is you see two as one. And that's that you cannot have creation unless you have destruction. And that's why the role of the innovator is so hard, because you're going against something that everybody's doing. Systems don't want to change. They're very happy. People are comfortable with it. And for you to go on and change those things, it's not an easy way to go. The thing I hate about entrepreneurship is there's so many buzzwords and people give you frameworks and formulas and everything else, but you need a lot more than that. And so I've said, we're teaching entrepreneurship wrong. And then finally they gave me this class so I can make the point. How do you make great entrepreneurs? Well, you have to look at through the journey through innovation. And typically, when they talk to you about it, the roads look like this. I mean, and this is a lean mentality. They oversimplify things instead of looking at them for the complexity they actually have. The thing is, they think you're just going to jog through and go like this. In reality, your path looks like this. However, if you can develop the vision and understand where you're supposed to go, all of a sudden, Jobs and everybody else saw the yellow line. They didn't see this huge, massive mess. And what is this called? Self-efficacy. Self-efficacy is actually the real key to an entrepreneurial mindset. And what self-efficacy is when you look at something, you could see a path to a solution, and more importantly, you see your role in following that path and how your actions will create success. And that's what this class revolves around. Your role in it, and that you can make a change. The thing is, if you can see what's coming, you have a better chance of being successful. Now, it was kind of funny because another professor and I said, well, what do you teach? How do you teach your students to do something new? And one professor said, go ahead and try it. And I'm there like, I don't think so. And what I do is I tell my students, you need to understand the landscape of the situation, figure out what your options are, and pick the best path. And so the professor asked me, where on earth are they going to learn that? And so that's what this course is at. And when you see all my other courses, it's all the same thing. The hard reality is you only get so many shots, and that's what they don't talk about. For example, we have 4 zombies coming into the room. You've got 4 bullets. So somebody just picks up a gun, fires. Oops, I missed. Gee, I don't know how to shoot. Yeah, I probably should have let someone else do it, but I tried. And that's my big problem with all this. And that's that be smart. Give yourself the best chance of success. And that's what being thoughtful and thinking through these things and exercising self-efficacy will give you. The thing is, know the problem. Think about the problem, and are you seeing the problem correctly? In terms of solutions, do you have the right ideas against the sea of biases? And in that case, you need leadership. Don't be afraid to fail. Well, here's the thing. There's failure, and then there's failure. And that's the thing. The way people define failure today is there's no such thing as failure. Oh yeah, you can fail. You can fail outright. But here's when something isn't failure. If you've gotten information that'll push you closer to what the answer is, then that's learning. And learning is a good thing. Why? Because as we'll see in this course, you've taken a problem that's this big, it made it this big. And then with more learning, it becomes this big, and eventually gets small enough that you can handle it. You saw in doctoral research, the average is 4 to 7 years. How long did Dr. Cho take? 1.5. And it's because it was brilliant or anything. Actually, the key to me graduating before everybody else that I went to school with is because I understood that when you design an experiment, whether you're successful or fail, there's learning. Meaning, gee, it didn't work, but guess what? I just eliminated half the work I have to do. The problem just got smaller. And so you have to adopt this attitude of what I call variable reduction. Leadership matters. It's really weird. Over the summer, I got a phone call from a buddy of mine. We went to MIT together. And crazily enough, his son wanted to talk to me. And it's like, oh, that really makes it feel old. But his son was having a startup and he wanted me to join it. And I'm thinking, why do you want an old guy like me? I've been out of the game for 10 years. You go find somebody young or somebody who could be more useful to you. And he said, look, my dad has talked about you a lot. And so I kind of feel like I know you. And you bring two things to the table that are difficult to find. One is you know how to problem solve. But not only do you know how to problem solve, you know how to problem solve efficiently. Meaning, I have a project management mentality. I bring things on budget and on delivery time. And he said, and a lot of people when they problem solve don't think that. And so you have that sense of urgency that I need. The other part is leadership. And honestly, I would be a horrible president. And I never wanted to be CEO because you're the face of the company and all, and I tend to be a mission-based person. On the other hand, I'm the leader you want, who you go say to, go kill bin Laden. And so, cool, I'm going to put my team together. And then you see the teams I put together and the people I choose to have. And we're basically like a biker gang. We're afraid of nothing. We all take care of each other. And we tend to be brash. Anyway, when you look at uncertainty, the nature of it is anytime you have uncertainty and you need to make a decision, it is a game. Always think about it. And the first step of any game is, are you in or are you out? The thing is, only 1 in 10 technologies are market feasible, and yet I'm 4 for 4. 4 technologies I've created have all gotten out into the market. And so, am I some kind of super genius? Oh my God, how could you do that when your chances are 1 in 10? No, it's because I understand the nature of games. Who wins? The person who sees this, the person who sees this, the person who sees this, or the person who sees this? I'm the person on the right. And this is why I make it a point to learn and to study, and so I see more of the problem. People made fun of me because I wouldn't stay in one field and I bounced around. And they said, why don't you just focus? But what it came down to is each of those jobs was a different experience. And so my vision just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And it's because I knew I wanted to be an innovator. The person who sees most of the problem is the person who wins. And so the problem with startups is every startup is one of 3 components. And people tend to be biased. They look at it as a marketing problem, or it's just a product problem, or just as building a company problem. The hard reality is if you want a successful company, it's a serial process, meaning all 3. Think of it as links in a chain. You just need one to break and you lose it. But what it comes down to is what's your probability of being successful in all 3 things. And so what it comes down to is you need to get those probabilities up. But the first step in any game is, are you in or out? And the thing is, a lot of things that were high risk, I was out on because I said, I can't execute against it. There's not enough money, or there's not enough time, or the technology is going to take too long. And so I only picked things that I knew I could be successful at. And that's the attitude that entrepreneurs need more. It's all about you learning. And learning is about the process of acquiring information, whether it's experience or study or whatever. But wanting to learn is a mindset. And the fact that you're here in college tells me volumes about what your attitude is. Now, let's see, we're looking at a problem, and we're trying to get from point A to point B. And what people do is when they look at these problems, they say, okay, and this is what happens in startups, and this is what I mean by efficiency. People follow the orange line. Your mentality needs to be, how do I do this? How you get there matters. And if you could do it efficiently, then you beat everybody else. The way I want you to look at problems is problems exist in space. What are all the variables and everything in the background that matter? And then out of all those variables, there's only a couple that really matter, and that's the nature of the problem. And then you need to figure out how you're going to traverse it. But that's the whole key. So, how are we going to start this course off? Storytelling. Storytelling, not only is it a great communication tool, it's a great analytical tool. What is literature? My minor. And this is what literature is about, is you get all these little details and all these little pieces of information, and then you need to figure out how they're all connected and how they're all related. And once you come up with that, you found the truth. And that's basically what research is too. So literature actually taught me to become a better researcher. And a lot of that is storytelling. I'll look at information, I'll just stare at it and go, what story are you trying to tell me? So, welcome to the class, and let's get started on our journey.